Their boots were worn down to leather scraps, their uniforms sun-bleached and stiff with dust, their faces hollow from years of war across North Africa and Europe. But nothing prepared the captured German soldiers for the moment the fog lifted and the coastline appeared before them. It wasn't Europe. It wasn't a battlefield. It wasn't rubble or ruins. It was the United States of America. And it looked like another world. The ship's engines roared as it approached the harbor, and the German POWs crowded against the rails, squinting into the bright sunlight. Instead of shattered buildings or bombed ports, they saw massive shipyards, cranes taller than anything in Europe, and rows of factories stretching farther than the eye could see. Steel, smoke, motion, everything buzzing with energy and purpose. Dozens of brand-new Liberty ships sat lined up like freshly minted coins, each one a product of America's unstoppable industrial machine. Some POWs gasped, others whispered to each other in disbelief. A few stood silently, realizing for the first time that Germany never had a chance. "I thought America was just jazz, movies, and cowboys," one prisoner murmured. Another replied, voice shaking, "If they can build this much, how could we ever win?" When they had been captured, many German soldiers expected to be sent to a devastated, resource-starved land, a country exhausted by war. Instead, they were greeted by a superpower in full motion. The docks overflowed with equipment, trains thundered through rail yards like veins carrying the nation's industrial blood. Factories exhaled clouds of steam as thousands of workers, men, women, even teenagers, poured out during shift changes. The POWs were stunned. America didn't look like a nation at war. It looked like a nation built for war. They passed rows of trucks, tanks, artillery pieces, all in pristine condition, freshly painted, ready for deployment. In Germany, equipment was patched together with salvage parts. But here, machines looked new, not repaired, not scavenged, manufactured by the thousands. One German officer whispered, "In Germany, we repair one tank for weeks. America builds a tank in hours." As military trucks escorted them from the port, the shock grew deeper. Highways wider than anything in Europe stretched across the land. Billboards advertised products despite the war. Farmland lay in perfect rows, untouched by bombs or artillery. Factories churned day and night, their smokestacks dotting the horizon like a forest of steel. The prisoners were silent now, not out of fear, but awe. And when they reached the POW camps, the next shock hit them even harder. The camps were clean, organized, and surrounded by miles of rich farmland. Americans didn't starve their prisoners. They put them to work, harvesting cotton, picking apples, building silos, repairing roads. Food was abundant. Water was clean. Some camps even had libraries, theater nights, and baseball fields. Many German POWs ate better in America than they had in the Wehrmacht. A German sergeant turned to his comrades and whispered the truth every one of them had been avoiding. "We lost the war the moment it began. We just didn't know it." For the first time in their lives, these soldiers saw the full scale of American power, not through bombs or tanks, but through factories, farms, trains, and the endless hum of a nation untouched by war and fueled by millions of workers determined to win. The war was still raging in Europe and the Pacific, but for these POWs, the war was already over. Because standing in the heart of America's industrial might, they understood the truth. Germany had fought the United States without ever understanding what the United States truly was. After their first shock at the American coastline, the German POWs were transported inland, deeper and deeper into the heart of a nation they had been taught to underestimate. But the journey that followed would shake them even more than the mighty ports and towering cranes. As the trucks rolled westward, the prisoners realized something no propaganda in Germany had ever told them. America was not just powerful, it was enormous. For miles that seemed to stretch forever, The road carried them past landscapes untouched by the devastation of war. Bright green fields, vast orchards, endless rows of corn and wheat swaying in the wind. There were no bomb craters, no ruined towns, no scorched bridges. Only prosperity and peace. The POWs stared in stunned silence, barely speaking as they watched farms larger than entire German villages glide past their windows. One soldier whispered, "How can a country so untouched fight a war on two oceans?" Another answered quietly, "Because they have everything." It wasn't just the land, it was the people. On the roadside, German prisoners saw trucks filled with American workers heading to factories. Men too old for combat, women in overalls, young men barely out of high school, all of them working relentlessly, all of them moving with purpose. Germany had factories too, but they were shrinking under Allied bombings, forced into caves, struggling for steel and fuel. Here in America, the factories were alive, loud, massive, unstoppable. And America didn't pause for war, it powered through it. As the POWs reached the manufacturing centers of the Midwest, their shock deepened. Through the truck slats, they saw factories the size of entire German districts, with endless parking lots full of cars, a sight unimaginable back home. They passed industrial cities whose skylines were covered in thick clouds of steam and smoke from thousands of machines working day and night. The contrast was overwhelming. In Germany, factories were dark, damaged, and desperate. In America, they were engines of creation. The POWs were eventually brought to the camp where they would work, but again, reality defied their expectations. Instead of forced starvation or brutal conditions, they found order, food, and a strange sense of routine. They were soon assigned to nearby farms, factories, or lumber yards, not as slaves, but as supervised laborers. The Geneva Convention was taken seriously here. And then came their next shock. They were paid. It wasn't much, a few cents per hour in canteen credits, but it was more than most German civilians now received under rationing. Many POWs bought soap, tobacco, canned fruit, postcards, even American chocolate. Some spent their credits on English dictionaries. One captured lieutenant joked, "We came to conquer America. Instead, America is teaching us English." But the greatest shock came not from work or pay, but from freedom. Within the camp, the rules were strict, but outside, in the surrounding towns, something remarkable happened. Americans didn't fear the prisoners. In some farming areas, guards didn't even carry loaded rifles. Farmers gave POWs water, food, and sometimes small gifts. Children waved at them from fences. Women at the local markets spoke to them cautiously, but without hostility. To German soldiers raised on Nazi propaganda, it made no sense. The enemy was supposed to be brutal, barbaric, inhumane, but instead they found kindness mixed with something far more intimidating: confidence. The Americans didn't feel threatened. They didn't feel afraid. They didn't feel outnumbered. They simply felt certain they would win the war. And that certainty, that calm assurance, unnerved the German POWs more than any factory, any shipyard, or any weapon. Because it revealed a truth deeper than industrial power. America believed in its victory before the victory even arrived. As the sun set across the endless American plains, many POWs sat outside their barracks in silence, staring at the land that stretched farther than their imaginations. One finally said what the others were thinking: "This country is bigger than our whole army." Another replied, "And stronger than we ever knew." That night, as the stars rose above the camp, the POWs felt something strange, a mixture of respect, envy, and fear. They realized that what they saw in America was not just a nation winning a war, they were witnessing a nation built to win any war. When the POW trucks rolled deeper into the American Midwest, The German prisoners expected the landscape to eventually thin out, for the factories to shrink, for the farms to grow smaller, for the machinery to become scarce. That was what war did to nations. Germany itself had shrunk under the weight of constant bombing, shortages, and desperation. But in America, the opposite happened. As the convoy rolled farther inland, the world grew digger. By the time they neared Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, and the industrial belt, the German soldiers felt as if they had entered another planet, a world built not on fear or survival, but on a relentless, unstoppable force called production. The sky glowed orange from furnace light. Miles of train tracks vanished into the horizon. Freight trains roared past every few minutes, each hauling tanks, steel plates, engines, artillery, and crates stacked taller than the POWs themselves. One German corporal gripping the truck railing whispered, "Mein Gott, this is not the country, this is an engine." As the trucks slowed near the industrial districts, the scale only became more overwhelming. Factories stretched for entire city blocks, some so large the POWs couldn't see where they ended. Chimneys pumped steam into the cold morning air, turning the sky into a cathedral of smoke and sunlight. Tens of thousands of American workers streamed into buildings wearing helmets, goggles, coveralls, working in shifts around the clock. These were not bombed, struggling factories like those in Essen or Hamburg. These were factories in peak condition, new machines, full electricity, synchronized assembly lines where every motion was drilled to perfection. One POW, formerly a foreman in a German factory, stared at the endless rows of machines and said quietly, "In Germany, we build a plane in a week. Here, they build one every hour." The trucks pulled to stops near loading docks, where forklifts zipped between crates marked with U.S. Army stamps. Newly built aircraft engines sat on pallets, gleaming under the sun. Shells were stacked in perfect rows. Jeeps were being rolled onto trains so quickly that workers barely paused to breathe. And then came the most shocking scene of all. Women, thousands of them, operating the machines. German soldiers who grew up in a culture where women were expected to stay home stared in disbelief as American women welded steel plates, assembled engines, loaded ammunition, checked blueprints, and commanded factory floors with confident authority. To the POWs, this was unimaginable. To America, it was normal. "Well, we march on foot. Their women build fleets." The trucks moved on, and soon the POWs saw another sight that rattled them. Fleets of brand new trucks and tanks rolling off assembly lines straight into waiting freight cars. Some vehicles were so fresh they still glistened with drying paint. And everywhere were the railroads. Massive, endless, unstoppable. In Germany, rail lines were constantly bombed, sabotaged, or broken by shortages. In America, they were arteries pumping steel and fire across an entire continent, day and night, without pause. One German lieutenant turned to the others and said what they all silently understood. "We didn't lose the war in Africa. We lost it here." Finally, the POWs reached their assigned work areas: lumber mills, supply depots, rail yards, and farms adjacent to the industrial giants. And for the first time in their lives, they worked inside a system that functioned with precision, coordination, and wealth they never imagined existed. Every machine had spare parts. Every tool had a replacement. Every worker had food. Every train arrived on time. Every day, the factory output increased. Even the guards seemed relaxed, confident, and utterly unafraid, as if they knew the war was already a matter of time. One American supervisor, smiling casually, told a POW translator, "You Germans fight hard, but you can't outbuild us." The POW translator didn't reply. He didn't need to, because by now every German soldier understood the brutal truth. Hitler's armies were fighting with courage. America was fighting with infinity. As night fell and the POWs lay in their barracks listening to the distant rumble of trains and factories, they realized they were hearing something far more terrifying than gunfire. The sound of a nation manufacturing victory.
After weeks of working in America's farms and industrial districts, the German POWs thought they had seen everything the United States had to offer. They had seen its factories, its railroads, its farmland, its cities, and its people. They had witnessed the nation fueled not by fear, but by confidence. But they soon discovered something far more shocking, something that shook them deeper than any steel mill or assembly line. They discovered how Americans actually lived. For the first time, POWs were taken into American towns to work at mills, orchards, canning plants, and lumber yards. And when they stepped into these towns, they saw a side of the war that Germany could not even dream of. Streets lined with clean shops, children running freely, families buying fresh vegetables, meat, eggs, items that had long disappeared from German stores, restaurants open every evening, movie theaters showing films, ice cream shops crowded with young people laughing in the summer heat. One POW stared at a grocery store shelf stacked with goods and whispered, "In Germany, this would be enough to feed a village." Another replied, "Here, it feeds one family." American civilians lived better during wartime than many German officers lived before the war. To the POWs, this was madness. How could a nation at war still enjoy this much abundance? How could people live with such comfort when their sons were fighting across the world? And what shocked them even more was the freedom. In American cities and small towns, people spoke loudly, complained openly, laughed freely. Newspapers criticized politicians, radio hosts joked about the president. Workers casually discussed their wages, their unions, their rights. In Germany, such speech would have brought the Gestapo within hours. But here, in the United States, disagreement was not fear, it was normal. One POW, confused, asked an American guard, "You can insult your leaders, and they do nothing?" The guard laughed. "Why would they? It's a free country." Those words, "free country," struck the POWs harder than any bombing raid ever could. That freedom extended even to the POW camps. As long as prisoners obeyed rules, they were allowed sports, music, reading, drawing, gardening. Some camps even allowed Sunday dances where POW bands played music for American families. In Texas and Arkansas, German officers watched in awe as American guards escorted them to movies in town theaters. Yes, actual movie nights for POWs. In one camp, a prisoner murmured, "We are living better here than many German civilians." And he wasn't wrong. When POWs worked at farms, American families often offered them lemonade, pies, cookies, or sandwiches. Some women handed them books. Children asked them questions. Farmers shook their hands and said, "You guys work hard." Guards sometimes stepped aside and allowed prisoners to eat lunch with the farmers. It made no sense to them. These were the enemy, yet they were treated like human beings, not propaganda monsters. But the greatest shock came from something even larger, something invisible but unmistakable. Americans were not afraid of the Germans, not in their towns, not in their homes, not even when POWs walked among them. That confidence was not arrogance. It was the quiet certainty of a nation that knew it could not be defeated. When POWs received letters from home, they noticed something disturbing. Their families lacked food, medicine, coal, clothing. Cities were being bombed. Children hid in basements. The war was draining Germany to the bone. But in America, daily life went on almost untouched. America wasn't fighting for survival. America wasn't fighting for revenge. America was fighting because it chose to and because it could. One night in a Kansas POW camp, a German lieutenant sat under the stars, listening to the distant sounds of trains and machinery. He finally said aloud what every prisoner had been thinking. "We were told America was soft, but this country is stronger than the Reich ever was." Another POW answered, "Stronger than all of Europe combined." By the end of that summer, every German prisoner understood a truth that the Nazi leadership had never admitted. America didn't just have more resources. America had a way of life worth fighting for, and a strength impossible to break.
By the time the German POWs settled into their new routines in the United States, they had already seen the farms, the factories, the towns, the freedoms, and the staggering resources of a country untouched by war. But what they were about to witness next wasn't just impressive, it was terrifying. It was the part of America that no one in Germany truly understood: the supply system. This was the moment the POWs finally understood why America was unbeatable. Their work assignments now included helping at giant American supply depots, places so enormous they looked like small cities. Warehouses stretched across the horizon, full of crates stacked 5, 6, even 8 stories high. Military trucks rolled in and out by the hundreds. Forklifts buzzed like insects through a forest of steel and lumber. Rail cars lined up in endless chains, each one loaded with ammunition, uniforms, canned food, engines, spare parts, medical supplies, and equipment the POWs didn't even recognize. One German POW stared at a depot the size of a football stadium and whispered, "Germany does not have this much material in the entire Reich." And he wasn't exaggerating. What a single American depot stored in a month, Germany struggled to produce in half a year. The POWs watched American soldiers unload crates stamped with the most crushing words they had ever read. Replacement parts. Tanks? Spare parts ready. Trucks? Spare parts ready. Aircraft? Spare parts stacked by the thousands. Germany fought like a nation clinging to every weapon it had. America fought like a factory with infinite backups. And then came the moment that truly broke their confidence: the rotation system. Every time POWs were assigned to labor near rail yards, they saw the same process unfold. New trucks arriving, new tanks arriving, new rifles arriving, new ammunition arriving. It didn't stop. It didn't slow. It didn't even dip during holidays. America produced war material at such speed and scale that destroyed equipment didn't matter. If a tank was lost, America replaced it. If a truck was blown up, America replaced it. If an engine failed, America had 10 more waiting. One POW officer murmured, "We fight to keep what little we have alive. Americans throw away equipment we would kill for." Even the food warehouses stunned them. Germany rationed every ounce. Bread was cut thinner every month. Meat disappeared. Coffee became a dream. But here, the POWs watched U.S. soldiers unload crates of canned beef, vegetables, powdered milk, chocolate bars, cigarettes, coffee, all in quantities that seemed impossible for a country at war. One German sergeant held a tin can stamped U.S. Army ration extra and said, "This is extra? In Germany, this is a feast." But the real shock came when POWs saw another American marvel: the speed of replacement troops. Trains unloaded endless streams of young U.S. soldiers, healthy, tall, well-fed, confident. New boots, new uniforms, new rifles, new equipment, everything new. Not like Germany, where equipment was repaired endlessly and uniforms were patched until they couldn't be patched anymore. One German lieutenant turned pale watching the American reinforcements and whispered, "They still have this many men?" Another POW answered with dread, "They haven't even used most of them yet." That was the moment the German POWs understood the truth. America wasn't winning the war because it was lucky, or because its soldiers were stronger, or because of strategy alone. America was winning because it could replace anything. It could build everything. It could outproduce the entire Axis combined. And it could keep fighting forever. Germany? Germany was shrinking, starving, collapsing. America? America was growing stronger every day. A POW sitting on a loading dock summed up the fear every prisoner felt. Germany fights with courage, America fights with factories. And another added quietly, and factories don't get tired. Factories don't surrender. Factories don't die. That night, as trains thundered into the distance and warehouses glowed under powerful floodlights, German POWs realized the war's outcome wasn't decided on battlefields. It was decided here, in the warehouses, in the rail yards, in the factories. This was the moment Germany knew, truly knew, that it had lost. When the war finally ended and the German POWs prepared to return home, many of them stood in silence at the fences of their American camps, staring out at the same land that had shocked them from the moment they arrived. The factories still roared in the distance, trains still thundered across the plains, farmland still stretched into forever, and American families still lived with a level of comfort and freedom that wartime Germany could not even imagine. In those final days before being shipped back to Europe, the POWs realized something far deeper than military defeat. This wasn't just the story of a nation that outbuilt them, outproduced them, and outsupplied them. It was the story of a nation that never broke, because it didn't know how to. They had come expecting an enemy. They found a society. They had expected propaganda monsters. They found ordinary people full of confidence and dignity. They had expected weakness. They found power built on unity, freedom, and opportunity. And as they boarded the ships taking them away, many whispered the same words. America did not win because of numbers alone. America won because of who they are. For many POWs, returning to a ruined Germany was harder than captivity itself. Cities were ashes, factories were rubble, families were gone or starving, and the Reich that had promised them victory had left them with nothing but loss. But they returned with something valuable, a truth they carried for the rest of their lives. The war was never won on the battlefield. It was won in the factories, the farms, the freedoms, and the hearts of the American people. And decades later, when interviewed in old age, many former German POWs said the same thing. Captivity in America changed us. It showed us the world we had never known, and the truth our leaders hid from us. The war ended. Their uniforms changed. But that lesson stayed forever. No army can defeat a nation whose strength comes not only from its machines, but from its humanity. I asked you 2 questions. Make sure you answer both in the comments. I'm reading every single reply. Question 1. Do you think German POWs were surprised mainly by America's power or by America's kindness? Comment yes, no, and why. Question 2. Could Germany have ever defeated a nation with this level of industry and freedom?